Welcome. Howdy, everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome. Howdy, everybody. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Thanks for being here. Long time. You'll see as we get into this episode kind of why things happened the way they did. For those of you that have been following along over the last few months, I kind of put Anomalous America on the back burner for a little bit just because lack of time and it takes a lot of hours to get just a single episode together. And I just wanted to get back on the path with my other video series, Buried Empires, Ireland the Great, as you'll see. And then I wanted to have my Irish Etruscan roots video completed because all three of these videos are going to kind of link together. But yeah, welcome. Good to see y'all. Let everyone kind of trickle in. We're going to start off like I always do with these episodes, talking a little bit about face value Iowa. Just kind of look over some images. Just my Twitter thread. We kind of peruse that. For those of you that use Twitter, I create a thread for the week leading up to an episode, and I just add to it. Kind of gives you an idea how the episode's going to go in a way, but just gives you a way to follow along until we get to these actual live episodes. But this one's going to be really interesting. I had kind of mentioned that I wanted to follow the lines of the river as we come out of the Gulf, right? So our next few episodes, we're going to be making our way up the Missouri River. Kind of building the picture of ancient America. And looking forward to doing this one. We're going to cross back over to an article from Anomalous America, Illinois. And anyone that has already seen the Illinois episode will remember this material, but it's definitely worth a refresher as it correlates. It's a very important bridge into Iowa. So if anyone's familiar with my Rock Island material, that's where we're going to start off after the little Twitter thread refresher. But yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me. Gonna let everyone trickle in. Julian, good to see you. I'm glad I have one mod here. Appreciate you. Oh, Alchemist, thank you. Good to see you as well. Jack, thank you. Appreciate it. That's very kind words. Waterloo Bear, good to see you as always. X Factor. Yeah, Anomalous America is back. So I plan on doing 2 of these a month. That's about all the time I have for, it takes about 10 hours of work to get one episode together. And full-time dad, full-time work, plus this, it's tough. And I want to make sure that I'm not just broad stroking through my material and picking the stuff that I think really helps build the picture of ancient America. And the last few ones I really felt kind of rushed and just didn't have enough time in my private life to put together the material I wanted to. So if you guys haven't already, check out the Buried Empire series. That's going to constantly be overlapping with Anomalous America. And the Etruscan series as well. I pretty much wrapped that up, but you're going to see throughout all of these episodes, we're going to keep going back to the Gaelic and the Etruscan and the Phoenician, and kind of building a clear picture of this maritime race and what they had to do with the early stages of what we call America, or prehistoric America, or the old world. But yeah, so again, thank you everybody. Welcome. Lone Star Viz, good to see you again. Elizabeth, thank you for being here. Green Tea, so much ancient history and many mounds all along the river. Excited to hear. Oh man, yeah. So, obviously that's a big focus of mine is mounds. But anybody, again, that's followed enough these episodes knows that mounds play a very important part. But we're kind of turning the table here with this series and showing you that a lot of these mounds weren't just burial mounds. They were cities, buried cities. Looking back through Colorado, looking back through Arizona, New Mexico. Oh, look at this big mound. You know, they expect to find a burial and they find hundreds of rooms, if not thousands of rooms. So again, for any of you new listeners out there, I can't recommend the rest of the episodes enough. It really changes your outlook on what ancient America was like, and we're just keeping it going. Um, but yeah, so 80 of you in here. I think we'll go ahead and just get started now and jump into material. First, we're going to start with going through the Twitter. So yeah, for those of you that don't have a Twitter, you don't need it. You can still look through my thread without having an account. And if you don't like Twitter, that's no problem. That's why these episodes are here. So, but yeah, let's do it. We're going to get rid of me here. I guess not. We're going to make it bigger. Hope everyone hears me okay. Again, I've been trying to make the mic and the audio as best I can. So I've been adjusting it every little few episodes to get it as close to perfect as I possibly can. There's no such thing as perfect, but you understand. We got a lot of background noise in this house, obviously, with everybody still little kids running around and everything. So trying to tune all that out. Okay, so I like to start off these little threads with some kind of explanation to the name of the state. It doesn't always work out that way, especially when it comes to finding an actual article that explains it. Sometimes I'll run through Wikipedia, whatever suits the need. But I like this explanation, so I made it this first post. Really, definitions of the word Iowa. Some Indian explanations is here is the place, as the Iowas and the Sacs were driven from Wisconsin and Illinois. So remember that factor, okay? We're talking about them being driven out of Illinois and Ohio, because we're going to get into showing you some pictures of these quote Indians and talking a little bit more about their history. We're going to be talking a lot about the Phoenicians. We're going to be talking about the red paint people or the red ochre people. Anybody that's familiar with my streams with Old World Florida, we've covered this subject a lot. These quote red ochre burial graves, red ochre burial paintings. We find them in California, Arizona, Colorado, all along the Mississippi. We find them in Florida, Texas, Mexico. We find them in Italy. We find them in Africa. We find them literally all around the globe. And then many of these peoples describe a mariner race that were painted red. And red ochre being the form of natural sunscreen, that you had these tall, fair-skinned people that were covering themselves in ochre to avoid being sunburnt. And the Seminoles, the Creek Indians, the Cherokees, the Sioux Indians, the Iowa Indians, on and on and on. There are dozens of these cultures. They're found all over the globe, and we're going to connect them right back here to Iowa. But yes, so here is the place for us to live unmolested. So again, the northeastern colonies were spreading into Ohio at this time. We're talking late 1700s, early 1800s, and these people were just getting pushed. The earliest datings of these quote red ochre graves, they start in Maine. Where? In Orland. Talked a lot about Orlando, is just Urland, land of Ur. Ireland being the land of Ur, the land of summer, the land of Sumer, connecting again Babylon, Sumeria, and these older ancient worlds, not necessarily with where they are today, and that those have been fictitiously placed there by the people who usurped Etruria, Italy, Rome, and wiped out the Celtiberian, Finnic, Phoenician race, and they fled these usurpers to a land that they had inhabited for hundreds, if not thousands of years, Ireland the Great, or America. But finishing off here, this definition, a high Illinois bluff overlooking Iowa, wonderful for, and he that goes everywhere. Again, you'll find so much of these tribes. You know, when we talk about Tartars, we talk about Hyksos, we talk about Scythians, you'll find that these terms, these names were not necessarily what they gave to themselves, but what Rome gave to them, and they described a wandering race, um, the shepherd kings, so to say. We're going to look at some old pictures here. Welcome, everybody, as you're trickling in. Thanks for being here. Episode 20, Iowa. Yeah, these are all from the mid 1800s. Iowa built anywhere from 6 to 9 different corn palaces. The numbers vary depending on the source, but I found 6 pictured, but they're all epic. This is, I mean, again, these are mid 1800s, 1850s, 1860s, you know, horse and carriage, right? And look at the size and scale of these things. And they're torn down every year. Let's do, why is it? Okay, there we go. Just go back and show this one again, scale. I've shown a lot as we go farther into the breadbasket, so to say. We're going to show more corn palaces. They often were covered in swastikas and Celtic symbolism. Again, the corn symbolism, Isis, Queen Mu. We've been touching on a lot of that throughout all of my videos, but just incredible things to be building when everyone's basically living in poverty, or so we would describe it as such. We're going to look through a few of these bird's eye views. And again, everybody, welcome. Thanks for being here. Broke 100. Let's go for 200 people here in the live today. Burlington. See if I can. Hopefully that makes it full screen for y'all. Does that make it full screen? Good enough. StreamYard is really silly, and when you're using one monitor, it tries to split the size. So 1889, Burlington, Des Moines. We're going to cover some articles about Des Moines, but Des Moines, like almost all of these cities along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, they're all ancient capitals, just like what we showed in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Basically everywhere in America, if not the entire realm, cities are built on top of previous cities, and Des Moines is a perfect example of that. Lyons, however you want to pronounce it. McGregor. I love these ones because inside of all these hills in McGregor, they found huge cave systems that went on for miles, essentially. All right, this is going to be an important one to remember because we're going to start off a lot of our material talking about this, and this is where we get into talking about the bridging the gap. I mentioned Iowa being the episode I wanted to do after Illinois, but it didn't quite happen that way because I wanted to cover Ohio. Davenport, really important place. Again, the whole city built on mounds. It's hard to see in this image, but there were like 18 major mounds, and then a grouping of what they called 7 mounds or 7 hills. Again, Davenport, Iowa being the city of 7 hills in older times. And here we are looking across the river, or here we are on Rock Island looking at Davenport. And here we are on Davenport looking at Rock Island, really important place. Anyone that's remembers in previous episodes, I talk about Rock Island, and that's going to be a huge segue here. This is the courthouse, mid 1800s. Look at the buildings. Okay. You saw the previous buildings with the corn palaces, shanty towns, everything's made of wood. But here we are, dirt road, buried buildings. All these buildings are mud flooded. We're going to talk about the mud flood a little bit and some of the geological paths of Iowa that nod to this mud flood. Here's a courthouse again with the bottom floor being half buried and stairs going up. Common theme. Here we are at the state capitol. If you find old enough pictures, the state capitol is completely weathered. All of the granite showing dozens, if not 100 years of weathering. Um, they're starting the whitewashing process here in the mid 1800s, where they're basically staining or cleaning or repainting the granite. After this, the building becomes perfectly white, but you can see a lot of the domes have show aging, as does the building. An absolute masterpiece, built on a mound. Go figure. You can imagine that this guy goes several stories, but here it's quite easy to see. You have the whole bottom floor buried. They want you to think these are construction photos. That's what they're listed as. But if you followed anybody else's material on YouTube that's covered these old buildings, you'll never really see true foundational images. They're just these. This is the process, I believe, where they're cleaning the building. And then this is called Terrence Hill Mansion. Um, Another beast with a buried basement floor with windows showing. This was eventually destroyed. Now we're going to get into some Indians here, and I want to shrink this back up and see what everyone's saying. You don't pronounce the S's at the end of Des Moines. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, no matter what, if I'm not from the area or, I'm going to mess up a lot of these, especially when it comes to, Indian names or whatever. So pronunciation errors, give me some grace. Appreciate everybody being here. Tons of old world there. Yep. Independence does a tour of its underground main street. Yeah, underground. That's a huge theme when it comes to all of these cities, as I've mentioned here in my own home city, Portland. They were still giving tours in the 90s. They canceled, they stopped doing that. They've kind of become drug dens and places of refuge for the homeless. And they've been closed for 15 years now, or maybe even more than that, 20 years. But it's every city. Almost all of these major cities in your states are going to have huge underground areas. Basically, they're just basement on basement on basement. In fact, in Portland, it was up to 3 stories of buried floors, and many of them were completely unaware of them or uninhabited, or the whole Shanghai concept had its bearing here in Portland, where they basically had trapdoors in all these bars and people just disappear. Um, but yeah, now we're going to jump into some of these Iowa chiefs and warriors, and anybody that's seen my material, again, going backwards and talking about the Seminoles and the Creek Indians. I did a breakdown of many of the names, and they were not only familiar with Gaelic tongue, many of them had chosen Gaelic Irish names, whether chosen or that was their actual name. That's open to discussion, but their language has a million similarities with the Irish. The Irish connection is really important. Ancient Ireland here in America, what that actually means. Yeah. So we're going to jump into some of these. White Cloud. These guys wear a dress almost identical with the Creek and Seminole Indians, and many of their names have very eerie Gaelic translations. And we'll cover more of that as we get farther along. These paintings are just beautiful. They're from the 1840s. I mean, I've talked already, and Dr. Longo did a series about this. So you can look at Old World Florida, where he talks about the Seminoles, but he describes, again, the feather in the hair, Eber, sons of Eber, Ebra, Aaron, Hebrew. All of these things keep going back to the Gaelic tongue and even the turban. Pictures are just incredible. This gentleman here, like many of the chiefs, actually the warrior class painted their face in red ochre. Important distinction, well, because that's going to correlate with so many different tribes all around the world. Again, the turban. But yeah, incredible jewelry, just like the Seminoles. The necklaces, again, are found on a lot of the burial tombs and mounds. Not what were shown or described, for sure, when it comes to um, quote native races, especially along this part of the world. But yeah, so just remember these because we're going to get into the red paint people. We're going to talk more about um, ancient relics found and how it correlates again with the Etruscan and the Gaelic and so on and so forth. Sherry, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Freeman, welcome. Pencil Ninja, good to see you. Sarah, thanks for being here. What are we at? 150. Awesome. Thanks for being here, guys. Welcome again. Episode 20. It's been a long one coming. All right. So we're going to get into just a long list of some shorter versions before we dive deeper into books and bigger threads. So remember what I mentioned earlier? What just happened there? Okay. Discovery of an Iowa underground forest. This is something that has been just about in every state as well. The McGregor News, again, McGregor, no pun intended there with the Irish nod, who lives on a point of land nearly the highest in Fayette County, east of Claremont, while sinking a well a few days ago through a heavy clay at the top of a hill at the depth of 12 or 15 feet, came upon the top of a forest. The trees, many of them standing upright in the solid earth, the trees were small, about 15 feet in height, and standing in a position showing that the earth by which they were submerged had been gently and gradually deposited around them, else they could not have maintained an erect position. Now, this is a really important piece here. We've talked about the standing forests now in several states, Colorado being a big one, Oregon being a big one, where they find, anywhere from 10 to 50, 60 feet below the surface, a standing forest. In fact, many of the coal mines east of the Mississippi, they find very similar things to this. And when we talk about buildings being possibly much older than they appear to be and not built by the race inhabiting the area, and when people mention the mud flood, this is what it looks like, because we can't talk about a forest that has been standing vertically if we're talking about an actual flood. Looking at like Mount St. Helens, if anyone is old enough to remember that eruption or at least seen what that did, it was a mud flood, but it was, an absolutely destructive one, ripping all the limbs off all the trees, turning them into toothpicks and sending them careening down hills, dozens, if not 100 miles away. But in situations like these, you have to ask yourself what happened, because again, this isn't the only example. Throughout many of these episodes, we found very similar things. Again, buried cities. I've covered this in so many episodes, not just mud flooded basements, but whole cities where if it was a flood, these things would have been toppled over. But you find that they're not always pumice. Sometimes they're of a volcanic origin. Other times they're mud and earth and clay. So the explanation here eludes us, but it's quite an important little article here. Pieces of petrified wood have been found in Hardin County, evidently maple, and were taken from the heart of a red sandstone rock 60 feet from the mouth of the main drift and 120 feet from the surface. They bear the marks of an axe or some sharp instrument on their surface. So, a maple tree taking from 160 feet below the earth, showing the signs that it had been chopped down by some kind of axe or some sharp instrument. I don't know how I got off the... Okay, I clicked on it. The first of these remains was discovered in March. What am I doing here? Is this the thread? Okay. Um, it was a gigantic sacral vertebrae, about 2 feet long and 15 inches wide, lying in bas relief on the bed of sandstone. Several large fragments of ends of limbs, thigh, and leg bones were found near, resembling Herculean war clubs. These were, with great labor, dragged through heavy snow to the railway station and forwarded to Professor March at Yale College, and by him were pronounced to be belonging to a new and gigantic species of dinosaur, the largest ever discovered and the largest known land animal. He named it Titan Saurian of the mountains. So Iowa is full of fossils, and yeah, we're going to show that. I think, as I've said throughout many of these episodes, that these fossils were existing at a time when man wasn't existing, and the idea of these Pleistocene and Mesozoic eras of hundreds, if not millions, of years are ludicrous, and that man and beast walked side by side, and you can call it the dinosaur, a giant lizard. There were sea creatures in this time that were absolutely gigantic. In fact, sea serpents, like Loch Ness, were a common theme into the early 1800s. And I've covered a few. In fact, in Washington, we talked about a massive inland sea that housed a gigantic sea serpent, and it had killed an entire group of Indians. And I've done many, many others like this. But yeah, so seeing a giant, quote, lizard is not that extreme. Okay, so now we're going to get into, I don't want to go that one. We're going to keep reading the short ones because I do a bad job of, I always run out of time. So we're going to skip ahead real quick, finish a few of these short articles, and then we're going to jump into Rock Island, which some of you will remember, and I'm sure many of you haven't seen that material. But it's an island in between Illinois and Iowa. And yeah, what they found there and how that's going to correlate to the rest of the discoveries of Iowa and the ancient people, quote, ancient peoples of Iowa. Foot of a giant found evidence that prehistoric men of Iowa were of huge stature. Des Moines, what is believed to be the petrified foot of some prehistoric dweller has been discovered in the rock beds along the Des Moines River near its conjunction with the Raccoon River in this city by W.H. Saylor, a stonecutter. The relic of rock indicates that men of gigantic stature may have long ago inhabited America. Its contour is exactly like that of a human foot, and the markings plainly show the toes and even the nails. It is asserted that it must have belonged to a man at least 12 feet in height and a very broad and powerful build. Now, something like this, taking at face value, what good does it do you? But again, this is one of hundreds now I've shown of giants, and probably one of dozens in the 12-foot range. So yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. Throughout the rest of my material, you'll find I share dozens of these. Workmen were drilling the artesian well at Centersville, Iowa. They tapped a subterranean passage, which seemed to be completely filled with bats. Not dead or petrified bats, but those of a real live kind. This at a depth of nearly 600 feet. 25 of 30 of them were brought out alive and well. They seem to be of the common gray bat, which is found all over this area, the Mississippi and Missouri valleys especially, but were much larger. So they drilled into a cave at 600 feet and found bats normally found in this region, but much larger. Now, really important again as well, because from Kentucky to Tennessee to Ohio to Illinois, these mining companies are finding things they shouldn't find hundreds and hundreds of feet below the surface. And I just love this one. I haven't found one like this with bats, although many cave systems obviously are filled with bats. But when you have bats 600 feet down, you have oxygen. And it makes you think, as I've stated so much, that we live on the surface of a subterranean vaulted world, and that there are thousands of miles of livable area under our feet, and that they've been inhabited since time immemorial. And all of these ancient cultures, especially these quote Indians or Aboriginal races of America, talk about that these cave systems existed and that they either buried their dead there or a previous race had burials there. You know, just look at my Mammoth Cave material, um, where they found 3,000 mummies and burned them all during the um, during the war, um, to melt some of the cave substance that they used for making bombs and other things. But 3,000 mummies were found in Mammoth Cave, written about several newspapers. These cave systems had been occupied and lived in, and I believe are still lived in. I did an article in, I believe it was Nevada, where they traveled um, they used a steam train underground in Nevada and traveled to all these different cities underground where they had all these different races, dwarfs. It was quite interesting how they described them living underground and had lived underground for their whole lives and had never seen the surface. But yeah, continuing that whole idea that, you know, what lies beneath Iowa. It's like I can't remember if it's Kentucky. I believe it was Kentucky. 1,200 feet down, a shaft was found, and they found a frozen or an icy ocean with huge glaciers, white sharks, white whales, blind sharks, blind whales. There's a whole nother ocean below us full of life. The petrified remains of a huge animal have been discovered near Percy, Iowa by a man named S.R. Dawson. It was lying beneath the surface of the bank of the Des Moines River. The total length of the body measures without the head 40 feet. The head was detached from the body and, when discovered, was some distance away from it. At 9 feet from the end of its tail, measured 4 feet 6 inches in width. In support of his theory that this is the petrified remains of some extinct monster, Mr. Dawson is describing the find shows that it is entirely unlike the storm formations in the vicinity. A spar of quartzite. Now, this is important because this is going to connect with a lot of the other petrified remains we've found throughout this series. A spar of quartzite formation was discovered in the locality where the blood vessels and intestinal canal should be. And another formation was found in other parts. So I've talked about this a lot when it comes to talking about mining ancient titans, and that the mining industry of today is just mining organic living things, whether it be giant animals, giant trees, giant people. But I've shown several times that when they find these petrifactions, you'll see that different organs petrify into different materials, right? They found trees that turned into complete copper. They found giant bodies in California that turned into gold and silver. Not the entire body, but chunks of them. And here we have parts of blood vessels and intestines turning into quartzite. So when it comes to talking about plasma, I've mentioned this again so many times before, and I strongly recommend people check out my talk with Stellium 7, where we talk a lot about this, and we throw around this theory where, you know, there's videos out there on YouTube where they use a microwave and they're able to crystallize and turn all these different minerals into crystals in seconds. Red opals are a huge nod to this. The coal system, I did a video on the history of coal and how I believe it directly. All of these things relate to living organisms. And yeah, so just wanted to touch on that one. I thought it was fantastic. So much of this, you know, so much of the kind of titanic ancient history. There's a lot of really interesting nods to this, and it takes a lot of work to kind of build all these little tiny pieces and fragments and bring them all together into kind of a cohesive idea. But anyone new to my material that hasn't heard me talk about that, I know that was kind of a glossing over, but I strongly recommend people check out Stellium 7, or they can watch my interview with him. It's in my Archivist series. And we cover a lot of that stuff, petrifactions of titans, and yeah. We're gonna skip that one. The spot where Des Moines, Iowa now stands was evidently at one time, says the Des Moines Reporter, the burial place of a prehistoric race. The first settlement of Des Moines found many a mound where houses now stand. Again, the building of houses on mounds, you'll find that like all of the kind of quote founding fathers of America built their houses on mounds. And this is all kind of energetic. I can't recommend there's a book, Ross Ben, Free Your Mound. Fantastic book. If you can still get it, I'm not sure if you even can. I bought it years ago. He does an amazing job of showing this and how these kind of new civilizations coming in and building their foundations on older, resetted, lost civilizations, and how these energetic points are represented by mounds and how they tie in with star systems, and that's again a whole nother subject. But yeah, most of these mounds are built to mirror the heavens, and that cities follow these patterns as well. So again, finishing up here, and people said Mud Fossil University. Yep, Mud Fossil, fantastic. Again, his videos are absolutely fantastic. I actually luckily came across his stuff kind of later down the road, and if it wasn't for Stellium 7 pointing me in that direction. But yeah, represent Ross Ben. Yeah, love Ross Ben. All his books are great, but Free Your Mound, just because it correlates with my materials so nicely. You'll find a lot of these mansion homes are built on top of these sacred burials of kings and queens, and there's no coincidence there. Not only that, but they connect to the subterranean systems. A lot of these mounds have tunnels underneath them, and they're all connected underground. Of course, they're all some are strictly burials, some are vaults into the subterranean. I covered that in my Missouri episode, where I talked about Missouri and Cahokia and Monk's Mound are all connected underground by tunnels, and that those were discovered in the 1800s. Okay, where was I? Okay, so yeah, where the houses now stand, and their curiosity often led them to make excavations. Many a curious specimen of artwork was found deep down beneath the outside covering of muck. Again, just like the mud flood idea, right? Just like they found with Cahokia and Monk's Mound, these things weren't built on the surface, they're buried. That they were actually could remove the earth covering. Mounds in Texas were found to be pyramidal, and they weren't earthen mounds, they were stone mounds, stone pyramids. And I believe the same thing with Cahokia, Monk's Mound, that these things go way underground and that they're built of stone. Again, not all are of this formation, but many are. They mirror quite blatantly the mounds of the Scythians, the Celts, and the Etruscans. And we'll loop all that back into here as we get farther along. And which would seem to denote a skill not possessed by the savages, who were then as plainly around Des Moines as they are now on their Kansas reservation. A very remarkable relic was found in a mound some 8 feet below the surface, which under a magnifying glass reveals a curious and delicate piece of either fine inlaid wood of different colors, long since petrified, or of peculiar metals or stone, arranged uniquely resembling the border molding or chasing of a monogrammic jewelry, and bearing an inscription, partly effaced letters, under which is a row of numerals, the whole conjectured to be a coat of arms. Now, this is really important because when you look at some of these Indians, they're buried with these coats of arms and these medals. That's something we'll talk about way further down the road, but correlating their relation again with these, quote, French, Scottish, and Irish noblemen. It's why are they wearing these arms, these coats of arms from Scotland? Why are their clothes the tartan of the Scots? Tartan is a style of fabric. It's that plaid. It's called tartan. That it comes from the Tartar. There's so many correlations there, but yeah. So again, they're finding this pendant with this burial, coat of arms, badge of tribe, or in sign of official distinction, which was buried with the person. It is a small affair, not much larger than a silver dollar. Exactly what I'm talking about. Yet a gentleman in Cincinnati once offered Des Moines possessor $200 for it. Another relic taken from one of the holes was peculiarly shaped hatchet, very unlike anything in use by the American Indians or border whites. It was not of stone, and while certainly of metal, seemed in neither iron or steel, and was so hard that a file managed no impression upon its edge. A lot of out of place artifacts, again, as we've been kind of showing through so much of this. Welcome anybody that's trickled in since I said hello. Appreciate you all being here. Thank you, Jillian, for posting the Stellium 7 video. Appreciate it. So I already talked about this one. Okay, we want to skip that. We're going to come back to the Davenport tablet, and that's going to be a huge piece here. We're going to go to Rock Island, then we're going to go back across the river to Davenport. Singular discovery. A recent Iowa paper gives the following account of an interesting discovery in Burlington, Iowa. In excavating a cellar, and again, I apologize. 90% of these clippings are very old, like 3-4 years old. So I didn't clip these thinking I'd ever share them. So I don't have dates for everything. And when I do, I try to share them. So this is from 1851. In excavating a cellar for Governor Grimes' new house, again, a governor's house, it's on a mound. I guarantee it. The workmen came upon an arched vault, some 10 feet square, which, on being opened, was found to contain 8 human skeletons of gigantic proportions. The wall of the vault was 14 inches thick, well laid with cement or indestructible mortar. The vault is about 6 feet from the base of the arch. The skeletons are in a state of preservation and are the largest human remains ever found, being a little over 8 feet long. Important article. Vaulted, showing you that we're not just dealing with these earthen mounds, earthen burials, that we've thrown out that idea out from Alaska when we started in number 1, first state, Alaska. Free your mound. Thank you, Jillian. Yes. Oh yeah, on higher side too. Perfect. Definitely check out Ross Ben, Free Your Mound. Amazing. That's a stellar interview. Perfect, Jillian. Thank you. Yeah, because that correlates perfectly with this. I guarantee this Governor Grimes' house is on a mound. All of these capitals, state capitals, courthouses, they're on top of previous civilizations, every single one of them. A party of laborers on the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad near Denison, Iowa, is making an excavation in a gravel bed a few days ago at the depth of 15 feet, came upon a vast accumulation of bones extending along a line some 2,000 feet in extent. Some of them, particularly the teeth, are in an excellent state of preservation, and all are of remarkable size, and could have belonged to no animals like those now living. Some of the teeth have been found weigh 8 pounds and are over a foot in circumference. So this is kind of looping back again, as I've been saying, that when we talk about the whole realm was one tropical climate, that we didn't have seasons as we know of them today, and that this idea has kind of held play with scientists, but again, they extend the timeline back hundreds of years, if not millions of years, and that I'm bringing that idea and throwing it out the window, and that I'm thinking that within the last 400 to 800 years, we were living in this tropical climate. That's why I started with Alaska as episode 1, because it most blatantly shows that we had a huge civilization living in Alaska, and tropical plants and animals were flourishing in Alaska at the same time man was building Etruscan, again, this is their words, quote, Etruscan mounds and advanced castle Greek architecture. And that's all the way through every state. Same thing. So they only had to go 15 feet down to find animals that are not like any of those living, right? And are gigantic proportions. This correlates with so many of my other states that man walked with beast. You look at my Nevada episode where they describe the Carson prison. They find the footprints of a 10-foot tall, minimum 10-foot tall man and a giant dog. So this 10-foot tall giant is hunting with this giant dog, and they're killing elephants. I mean, on and on and on. I have a whole series about man living and walking with beast. But yeah, I'm going to try and limit my random talking and just try to get through as much material as I can. We broke 208 of you. It's been a long time since I've been able to get back over 200 people watching, so I'm grateful. Hopefully everyone's happy the series is back. I'm definitely been excited to get this episode out, as I've been sitting on this material for quite a few months. But love you guys. Appreciate you being here. Big milestone. Happy to be back over 200 people watching. That means a lot. Ancient civilization in Iowa. Mound builders offer interesting field of study. Ages ago, tradition tells us Iowa boasted a culture which had passed away perhaps centuries before the coming of the white man. Today, on Tomahawk Island, near Eddyville, and in various localities along the Mississippi and confluent streams, one may pause and dream of a past civilization, which is still as much of a riddle as that of the Sphinx. One may still find in many localities in the state constant reminders of a Paleolithic or Neolithic age to which legend is our strongest tie. Again, these Neolithic, Paleolithic ages are but a few generations behind us, not dozens or hundreds. Lacking a better name, we call the people who developed this culture mound builders. See, I mean, you see how they're showing that even in this article from the 1800s, that they can't really separate Paleolithic and mound builder, that they are living in a similar time frame. Tradition gives them a fascinating history, but anthropology still speculates as to who they were. One cannot wonder why Iowa's anthropologists journeyed to faraway Arizona, Yucatan, Peru, seeking to unravel their mysteries of the past, when here at home is a romantic past fully as interesting in the possibilities of its revelation, though not so stupendous in its material remains as can be found elsewhere in the Western world. So well said. I can't tell you how many states, Colorado articles I've read like this, Oregon, where they're like, why are we paying all these universities to go overseas when we're not uncovering what lies right beneath our feet? And this is everywhere in the realm. How many more do we have of this? Okay, I don't want to spend too much more time. Perfect. We're almost done. Okay, natural ice making plant. An Iowa cave where water freezes all summer. On the northeastern bank of the upper Iowa River, opposite the city of Deborah, Iowa, is a remarkable cave. During the warmer days of summer, ice is formed on its sides and floor. The rest of the year, even when it's freezing outside, no ice is formed in the cave. During a visit to this cave last July, the temperature was 31 degrees. The walls were covered with frost, and there was probably a half and a ton of ice in the cave. A few places where the water was slowly dripping, icicles were being formed. There was a cave like this in my Oregon episode. Same thing. And how many caves where they talk about in the summer, cold air comes out of the cave, and in the winter, warm air comes out of the cave. The relationship between the subterranean worlds and our world here on the surface, or what we call the surface, there is an interchange there in the seasons and the temperatures. It's this rotational thing. And these caves show a nod to this. How does it make any sense that a cave in the summer freezes and in the winter it's hot? This is the explanation of the phenomenon. It is a well-established law of nature that the evaporation of any liquid requires heat. To evaporate 1 gallon of water at 212 degrees requires as much heat as to raise 6.7 gallons from freezing point to boiling point. We don't need to go through all that, but basically they talk about the temperature changes and how that affects the cave. But I think it has more to do with subterranean connections than it does with anything else. And this will be the last little short article we read. Find interesting ruins in Iowa. Archaeologists searching in ruins of ancient race find interesting relics. R.F. Gilder, archaeologist of Omaha, accompanied by Rev. C.S. Lies, D.C.S. Kennedy, and C.F. Peckinpah of Logan, the Reverend S.X. Cross of Missouri Valley, Professor blah, 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 opened one of the house ruins of the race antedating the Indians. The house ruins were discovered in Pottery Gulch near Magnolia, Iowa, and also the 12 mounds, all equal distance apart and equal in size, and all on the same line due north. So, again, this is just like what we've talked about in previous episodes, where sometimes they're burial mounds, sometimes they're buried villages. We look back just at like Arkansas, the largest city, ancient buried city ever discovered in the northern hemisphere was found in Arkansas. And the author postulated that it housed up to 12 million people. And that we're not just dealing with burial mounds, we're dealing with cities that have been buried in a mud flood event type of thing. Anyways, the house, blah, 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 blah. The ruins measure between 25 and 30 feet in diameter and were circular in form. The floor was discovered a little more than 3 feet below the surface. This is like some of the Arizona and Colorado ones as well, that they find that a culture buried their people on top of ancient buildings. So, like a lot of the cities in Arizona, they found a whole nother city below them. I think 4 or 5 of the main cities in Arizona that we know of today on the surface are built on top of a previous city that lies anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 stories below ground. And I think this is kind of a similar situation, that they find burials, but then they go deeper and they find a whole city, paved streets, on and on and on. The floor was discovered more than 3 feet below the surface of the ground. Pottery shards, arrow shafts, smoother pieces of pottery, and charred posts showing hacking of stone axes were among the many relics. At the present time, there are 29 mounds of the race antedating the Indians in Harrison County, and many finds of historical and scientific value have been discovered in the last half century. From the sand pits in different parts of Harrison County, parts of the skeleton of the mastodon, elephant, camel, and sloth. So when we talked about that previous article where they found 2,000 feet long, giant bones of all kinds of animals just piled together, here are some of the animals that they found. Camels, elephants, sloths, and again, they find giant horse bones, pygmy horses, all kinds of stuff that doesn't make any sense. The camel and the sloth. I did a video, you'll find it, man befriending giant sloths and milking them like cattle. That's a video. I can't remember what the title of it was, but giant sloths were found from Canada all the way into Argentina. Specialty to the schools almost has either been carried off and preserved in private collections or taken to other schools at a distance. That's always seems to be the case. It's rare that the relics found in that locality stay in that locality. They disappear into private collections or go elsewhere, usually into Europe. A movement is now being made here to collect and preserve the finds of historical and scientific value. Some of the most valuable finds of Nebraska, including a portion of the Gilder collection, were taken to the State University at Lincoln and destroyed when the building in which they were stored burned to the ground. So this is kind of something that I've hinted at before with a lot of these major fires. Obviously, that weren't just burning museums and universities, but I think this destruction of not only old world architecture but old world historical remains correlates quite nicely. But again, this is an article written, I believe, in the late 1800s, so you can imagine 10, 20, 30, 50 years of excavations and the really juicy material either going right into private hands, and that we're lucky if we ever hear about it. 221, everyone, welcome. Yeah, I mentioned Room 222 TV show. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I'll just pop into chat real quick. Brett Z, good to see you. I talk a lot of, I did an episode or a small video called "Is Tennessee Tolkien's Middle Earth?" Because you have everything in Tennessee. You have dwarfs living underground, you have pygmies, you have giants. It's quite crazy, and everything in between. Who else we got here? Jason Gray, good to see you. 70s Kid, welcome. David Robertson, good to see you. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you. 221 of you. Okay, now we're going to dive into Rock Island. So for some of you, I would imagine the majority of you, this will be completely new material, but for some of you, this is an article from Rock Island. Again, the island that you take a bridge from Wow, I'm spacing the name of it now. Oh, that's embarrassing. What is it? Davenport. Jeez Louise. So you cross the bridge from Davenport into Rock Island, and then from Rock Island you cross over into Illinois. The mounds on the Illinois side I covered in the Illinois episode, and there's tons of juice there. I have a whole video on this article talking about other correlations, but I'm going to jump into this article as it's a bit lengthy, and I am going to skip around a little bit. So if you want the full article, check out the video. Ancient Egyptian temple found beneath Rock Island. Easy lookup on my YouTube channel. Because then from here, we're going to cross the bridge off Rock Island into Davenport. We're going to talk about the Davenport calendar stone, what they gathered from that. Then we're going to jump into red ochre burial mounds and kind of building a picture of the quote mound builders or these ancient races of Iowa. So this is from 1869. Appreciate all of you being here. And again, welcome. 1 second. I apologize. Sorry. Ooh, what did I do here? Okay. Cavern under Rock Island. We have the pleasure this evening of laying before our readers the result of one of the most thrilling and profoundly interesting subterranean. You guys can see this okay? Maybe I should zoom in a little bit more. We're reading right here. Subterraneous expeditions ever attended on this continent. It is nothing less than an underground passage under Rock Island, the present site of the United States Arsenal. Now, I've talked about how naval bases, military bases, all are old world when it comes to talking about, your Area 51s or whatever, especially from a naval perspective. Connecting with the subterranean worlds again, like I mentioned in the Nevada episode, which a lot of these old mining areas are now governmentally controlled, military sites. It seems a bit interesting. And why would the arsenal be buried or be built on top of this structure? I also correlate a lot in the past these star forts and how the story we're given about the star forts, especially in America, which people kind of forget. They're kind of lost on people here, but there's star forts all over America, hundreds and hundreds. And the story we're given is that they were built by the French to defend against, the British or whatever. But that's a whole bunch of nonsense. Many of them are buried underground now. So this kind of mud flood event stuff took place after the star forts were built for the most part. And you'll find that when they talk about building these forts, they're really just digging out these stone structures. Rock Island's a perfect example. But yeah, so I'll keep going here. The discovery of antiquarian relics of the rarest and most interesting character. The entrance to a large cave, as our home readers are doubtless aware, is plainly visible from the ferry landing, as well as other portions of our city bordering on the riverbank. And although some 10 feet in diameter at the entrance, it gradually diminishes in size until some 25 feet are reached. When it is with difficulty, a person can effect an entrance by crawling through the aperture, but when once fairly through, there is no difficulty in standing erect. Sorry, my Google keeps doing weird. Keeps doing weird stuff. What is going on here? Okay. Until the recent interesting discoveries were made by the enterprising explorers representing the scientific society who are now sojourning in our city, this cave has never been known to be over 120 feet in depth and has possessed nothing more than ordinary interest. Expect as having, except as having been thought by the stern old Sac warrior Blackhawk to have been the chosen abode of the Great Spirit that presided over their destinies. Interesting. But upon close examination, at the terminus of one of the darkest and most intricate recesses, a narrow cavity was discovered in the rock, and by the aid of a torch forced into it, an interior apartment was found, upon entering which the party were enabled to explore the subterranean passage for a distance of nearly 1,000 feet. The main passage is some 6 feet in width and 9 feet in height, and is evidently a natural cavern, though in several places there are evidences of having been widened, as chisel marks can be distinctly discovered on the walls. Besides numerous small recesses at regular intervals of 50 feet, which bear traces of having been hewn out of massive solid rock, the second corridor leading from the main one is very extensive, containing 6 ponderous pillars unearthed with gorgeous decorations. Beyond this is a shorter entrance, in which is the entrance to the Sanctum Sanctorum, and which contains one of the grandest collections of antiquarian curiosities ever discovered on this continent. It contains a huge pedestal in the center, constructed of solid copper, upon which is erected a magnificent shrine, which, with its unique inscription, denotes the antiquity of its devotees. Surrounding it are the colossal figures of the 12 worshippers in kneeling posture, and quite contiguous to them is the though diminutive figure of an Indian maiden with a countenance of surprising beauty and strongly marked features, indicative of deep thought and wondering surprise, pointing with one hand to the expressive word engraved on the wall, Sheol, indicating thereby the end of their race is at hand. Above them all on its projecting and crescent-shaped roof are arranged in a systematic procession crossbows, arrows, and other weapons in warlike profusion, reminding one of the ancient sons of Persia and Greece. The atmosphere in this apartment is almost unfit to sustain animal life, being damp, heavy, and very impure. The torches of the exploring party were several times extinguished, and the persons having the expedition in charge barely escaped suffocation. Immediately adjoining the room containing these wonders is an obelisk of solid brass, some 7 feet in height, beautifully sculptured on 4 sides. There are in all 21 small bas reliefs, and above, below, and between them is carved an inscription 76 lines in length. The whole is in the best state of preservation. Scarcely a character of the inscription is wanting, and the figures are as sharp and well defined as if executed only a few days ago. One of the scenes represented is a circle of the ancient aborigines sitting in a council, with the all-potent pipe of peace performing its wotient circuit, while the fortunes of war and peace are being discussed in the presence of the white-winged presiding genius. Another scene represented a royal chieftain followed by his attendants. A prisoner is at his feet, while the men are being introduced, leading various animals and carrying ponderous crossbows, javelins, and other weapons. The animals represented are the elephant, the polar bear, the lion, the stag, and various kinds of monkeys. I would imagine this is zodiacal. Again, the 12 figures showing to that. The ornaments delicately graven on the robes of the party, the tassels and fringes, the bracelets and armlets, the elaborate curls of the hair and beard are all entire. One of the chiefs stands very erect and carries in his arms an animal resembling a chamois, upon his right arm. Anyone want to look that up? Chamois. I'm not sure what that is. And in the left hand, a branch bearing fine flowers. Around his temples are a fillet adorned in front with a rosette. One of the other characters is a tragical attitude, holds a square vessel resembling a basket in his left hand and a drawn dagger in the right, while on his head is a worn and rounded cap, at the base of which is a horn. The garments of both consist of a robe falling from the shoulders to the ankle and a short tunic underneath descending to the knee, and are richly and tastefully decorated with embroideries and fringes, while the hair is arranged with the study and taste. Kind of has a toga feel. Again, with the kind of crown around his head. The limbs delineated with peculiar accuracy, and the bones somewhat faithfully, though somewhat too strongly marked. After proceeding further, did anyone look that word up? Which one to see in chat? Nope. Partly reached a large room with a high arched roof, in which were the entrances to many chambers. This contained the crowning gem of the wonders, nothing less than a huge sarcophagus of copper, 9 feet long and 3 feet in width, minutely sculptured within and without, with several hundred figures representing an immense funeral procession and ceremonies relating to the deceased chieftain, with emblems and other devices. Again, 9 foot long sarcophagus. The lid was partially removed and revealed a quantity of bones and javelins. In one of the secluded corners of this apartment, and a few feet below the level of the floor, is the arched entrance to an unexplored chamber, approached by a narrow passage way down through the hideous stone stairway. The party, after repeated efforts to effect an entrance, were obliged to abandon it. In plainly defined Indian characters, it bears the significant inscription, "All hope abandon ye who enter in." That's funny because we have kind of a similar idea with the She-Hole and abandon all hope in a cave. I believe I want to say it was Colorado, but I can't remember. I think it was Colorado. Same type of thing. Sheol, an inscription into a deep cave that went way underground. While it extended to excite and increase the curiosity of the explorers, was wisely heeded. The knowledge of this ancient and interesting race does not seem by any means to have been confined to statuary and sculpture. Their weapons and the jewel ornaments with which their persons were adorned, though principally of copper, are in some instances finished with gold and silver, carved in the most exquisite manner conceivable, indicating mechanical genius and scientific attainments of the highest order. The luxury of an enlightened civilization are clearly delineated in these mysterious images and devices, rather than the wretchedness, ignorance, and superstitions of the semi-barbarous race. Excuse me. As eminent authors of the present age have surmised, our country, previous to discovery by Columbus, to have been inhabited by. Yeah, absolutely. And what were they? An enlightened civilization. Absolutely. At present, the strictest vigilance is observed at the cave, no persons being allowed to enter it without permission from one or more of the explorers, who are all, at present, the favored guests of the Rodman House. We congratulated the exploring party and the scientific association they represent for having, in defiance of the perils of the adventure and the ruthless ravages of time, brought to light these monuments of ancient grandeur and magnificence, and our gratitude at being furnished for publication the details of researches so thrilling and astounding in their character is only equaled by the absorbing interest which we feel confident our readers will experience in their perusal. So yeah, again, this is the 1860s. During the interval of proceeding further with their investigations, we understand it to be the intention of the party having the relics in their possession Now, this is going to sound just like everything else. To ship the movable portion of them at once to New York, and permission from the War Department for the removal can be obtained. Shipped to New York, leaving the area. And again, I scoured every article I could find pertaining to anything related to this island for like probably 5 or 6 years after the fact, and you never hear anything about it ever again. Pretty typical. But yeah, so again, highlighting the things that we saw. A copper sarcophagus 9 feet in length, carved in ornately, a 7-foot tall solid brass obelisk, all kinds of weapons, carvings of the zodiac, reminding one of ancient sons of Persia and Greece. Again, the kind of Grecian overlays. And what do these people look like? They had beards, curly beards and curly hair. But yeah, the copper sarcophagus 9 feet in length. I mean, it's kind of surmising again to the idea that we already touched on here, mentioning about giants and the race, this kind of race of mound builders or pre-mound builders being much larger than we're told. But yeah, so that's Rock Island again. If you're just getting in here, I have a video on this article, Ancient Egyptian Temple Found Beneath Rock Island, if you want to recap on that. But now we're going to hop over back into Davenport, Iowa. And why I wanted to read that will become a little more evident here as we talk about the Davenport stones. These, quote, Punic Celtiberian stones found in a mound on a farm in Iowa. So yeah, we're going to jump into this book here. It's called History of Davenport in Scott County, Iowa. You know, the Irish and the Scotia, no coincidence. Again, it's funny. It's called Scott County. But yeah, so for those of you that aren't familiar with this, we'll get this all zoomed in here. These are called the Davenport stones. Luckily, the Smithsonian said that they were fake or fraudulent. Fraudulent was the word they would use. So because of that, the city held on to these stones, and you can still see them today. But in the coming years, these stones would basically become one of the most important finds, at least when it comes to my perspective in connecting this material with all the other, quote, European, Phoenician, Etruscan groups that we've mentioned, not only in Mexico, but in South America, but all over the Americas. But yeah, this is their calendar stone here. Again, this was found on a farm in Iowa, just north of Davenport. And the zodiac matches the kind of Ptolemaic, if anybody's familiar with that. You have the central figure not being the sun, but being Earth or the person. And the calendar stone here delineates the zodiac that we have today almost perfectly. And we'll make some other correlations that this author goes into here. If you want to look this book up, it's insane. It's 1,000 pages, and there are just we could have just done this entire episode on this book and never even scratched the surface. But the amount of material and stuff they found in mounds here in Davenport, in Scott County, is insane. I mean, look at this, 1,000 pages, and it's not even all of Iowa. It's just Davenport and Scott County. But yeah, we're going to focus on this stone here. Hopefully you guys can see this. Again, if you want to look at this yourself, it's archive.org, History of Davenport, Scott County. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here for you guys so you can just take a look at them. This is said to depict a hunting party and also to depict the Noah's flood. This stone here is depicting the celebration of the sun, a solar festival. Here you have the sun, here you have the moon, and here you have the Deja Tower. We're going to get into another book by Barry Fell and read his description and his opinion on this because it's really important. But I want to go over this bit of material here first. Again, here's the calendar stone. Really, really amazing stuff. We're going to read a little excerpt from up here first before we move on. Where does he start talking about it? These important additions to the inscribed rocks of America naturally aroused great interest in the scientific world. The pictures engraved thereon have been held to indicate that these ancient Davenporters, or their ancestors, were on terms of acquaintance here or elsewhere with the mastodon who roamed the earth when it was much younger and frolicked over Iowa in the Aftoinian interim between the two periods of glaciation from the Keewatin ice sheet. So again, we've already kind of talked about how they find giant camels, mastodons, giant sloths right here in Iowa, and they're not hundreds of feet below the surface in millions of years of layering. They're just 15 feet below the surface. And again, we've already shown that they find all kinds of signs of man 100 feet or more below the surface. So man and beast walk together 100%, especially here in Iowa. The hieroglyphics which these tablets bear are doubtless of much greater value, and their interpretation would advance greatly the world's knowledge of these ancient peoples. So far, no one has arisen to perform this great service, but it is but a few years since. So again, we're going to get into Barry Fell, and he's going to kind of elaborate more on what this guy's saying is lacking. Other discoveries will be made which will furnish the clue to the mystery. The world waited long for the explanation of the hieroglyphics of Egypt. The cuneiform characters were long unsolved, and patience must wait upon the finding of the Rosetta Stone, which shall make the Davenport tablets legible. Again, really important, because we're going to talk about the languages here and the correlation again with the hieroglyphics of Egypt. We just talked about the tunnel there in Rock Island and how much of an Egyptian feel that had. And I would go as far as to say that the tablets here and the writings thereon, here's the languages they're written on here at the top of the stone. And Barry Fell is going to do a great job breaking these down. I'm going as far as to say it's the same types of letters found in that cave. Again, without going there myself, I can't say 100%, but I feel very confident in that. Of the comment from archaeologists, one citation will suffice. In the third volume of the Academy Proceedings appears a paper by Professor G. Seyfarth, PhD, in which these inscribed tablets are called the first discovered phonetic and astronomical monuments of the primitive inhabitants of the country, which sooner or later will cast unexpected light upon the origin, the history, the religion, the language, the science, and intellectual faculties of our ancient Indians. Yeah, absolutely. It will be noted that Professor uses the word Indian in a general sense as applying to all former inhabitants of this country. Okay, well said. As I've stated so many times before, we don't want to get hung up too much on the word Indian. Let's just say all former inhabitants of this continent, because that is layers and layers deep. This learned professor, author of numerous accepted works on archaeology, concluded that among the nearly 200 characters which appear upon the 4 tablets were indications of syllable writing among the mound builders. He found evidence that this people were of Asiatic origin. Again, really important, okay? Because we're going to kind of twist the whole Asiatic theme. In the picture of the tablet, he saw a scene of sacrifice to the sun, moon, and 12 great gods of the starry firmament. The second tablet the professor considers to be memorial of the Nochian deluge, and a commentary to all other traditions confirming the latter. It makes no difference whether the slab was engraved in America or in that country from which first the Indians immigrated, whether it was the work of the man in whose grave it was discovered or was a sacred relic preserved from generation to generation. Tablet 3 styles the most interesting and most important tablet ever discovered in North America, for it represents a planetary configuration, the 12 signs of the zodiac known to all nations, and the 7 planets conjoined with 6 different signs. The tablet 4 The savant considers to be a record of the great eclipse of the sun, the figure to be that of Mars, god of war, and the smaller figures etched on the upper edge of the tablet to be an eagle and a wolf. At the close of his extended and profound article, he sums up the reliable results obtained by the unparalleled Davenport antiquities, of which the following are the most important. So this is really important. Again, so in this same area, they found what I believe the number I finally came to was 11 different tablets like this, but only these three, which again, the Smithsonian said were fakes or frauds, but the other ones disappeared and you never saw them again. But as this gentleman has stated, I believe he was able to see them and correlates them to many of the other, quote, mound builder races of North America. But now we're going to go over the results he got. Number one, the primitive inhabitants of North America were no pre-Adamites nor offsprings of the monkeys, of course, but Noahites. They belong to the same nation by which Mexico and South America were populated after the dispersion of nations in 2780 BC. The literature of the American Indians evidences that they immigrated from Japan or Korea or proper China. Now, obviously, I disagree with that. If you guys see my material, we keep calling, Asia Major, Katai here, North America, or Mesoamerica, Mesopotamia, the origins being here and the immigration spreading from there. They must have come over prior to the year 1579 BC. Our Indians, as well as those of Mexico and South America, knew the history of the deluge, especially that Noah's family then consisted of 8 persons. The primitive inhabitants of America were much more civilized than our present Indian tribes. I think, again, the post-mud flood, post-apocalyptic scene that is America, late 1700s into the early 1800s, whether you want to correlate that, again, the Civil War overlays, the War of 1812, the Comet of 1812, the New Madrid event. There are so many things going on in this time period, again, correlating my own opinions and seeing the gap in the newspapers. Historical records almost are non-existent from 1840, early 1840 to the late 1700s. There is almost nothing. There's almost nothing being written about. There's nothing being found. There's no mines being operated. There's no new tribes being introduced. There's this odd, very strange gap in the historical record. And I think it correlates again to this, some kind of massive event. Whether it's the mud flood that happened universally around the realm or what, I'm not sure. But just from a archivist perspective, there is a huge timeline blip. 1830s, 1820s, early 1800s, late 1700s. The former understood the art of writing and used a great many of the syllabic characters based upon the Nokian alphabet and wrote from left to right like the Chinese. Really important. We'll get back to that later. But even the, quote, Indians or the Aboriginal races described coming into an abandoned kind of apocalyptic scene. They described cities abandoned, especially in the American Southwest, ruins, cave systems, abodes of ancient gods. Again, kind of like they were saying that chief described Rock Island. He knew what it was. He said it was a burial place of the gods. And you find a similar story with a lot of these mounds or buried ruins or remnants of buried ruins. And that the civilization that moved in or moved south, or however you want to look at it, describes the same thing, that they came into an area that had been destroyed. Maybe they even say there was a war between 2 opposing factions and they destroyed each other. That's also a story that's told. The Aztecs tell of coming from the north after an event, and they described that there were 4 different events that wiped all of mankind and that we were the 5th age. They were acquainted with the 7 planets and the 12 signs of the zodiac. They referred to the same stars. This is important because it's going to correlate with language. They referred to the same stars, to the same constellations as did the Chaldeans, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. Okay, so remember that. Chaldeans, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. Now, as I've been saying all along, that America is Egypt, and that Chaldea or Ur is here, Ireland the Great, Urland, which is a name for Maine and a name for Florida, Urland, and that the Greeks or Creek Indians. Well, the Creeks came later, but all of these cultures you can find very ancient overlays of them here in America. They had solar years and solar months, even 12 hours of the day. They knew the cardinal points of the zodiac and the cardinal days of the year. Oh, bushwhacking history in Buffalo. Solid researchman as always. Barry Fell is awesome, and the author I know I have interviewed before. Oh, cool. Mason Winfield actually knew him. Awesome. Good to see you. Love your channel. Yeah, when I get up to that area, we're going to have to do some work together. Absolutely. So yeah, again, remember all of these kind of designations again, because when we get a little bit deeper into the language and what Barry Phillip thought about this tablet, we're going to bring all of the Chaldean, Egyptian, Greek, Irish, Etruscan overlays under one umbrella. And you could do that again with the zodiac and this kind of idea of a one world religion. Although they didn't call it a religion, it was just the Magi were the astrologers. And you could think of the one world religion just being the stars above. And that God was kind of this within this relationship, as above, so below sort of thing. Their religion agreed with that of the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Greeks, the Romans, because they worshiped the planets and the 12 gods of the zodiac by sacrifices. Compare Isaiah. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have been drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Plutarch. There are no different deities to be found among the Greeks and the barbarian nations, either in the northern or southern countries. Now, well said. I've talked a lot about when the Etruscans fell, when Etruria fell and Rome was taken over, they pointed their sights on Ireland. And you can find this, as we're stating here, and what is a Tartar, what's Tartaria, what's Barbaria, the remnants of this, and that the Roman, the pagans, which again, pagan just means country person or person outside the city walls. And yeah, this, I think, again, is what was so hidden by the Spanish and the Catholics of, the quote post 1492 Columbus expedition, is they knew exactly what was going on here in the Americas. And remember, as we just stated, that this gentleman was saying proper China. Well, what did Columbus call America? He called it Asia. And he had the best map makers in the world and the best captains. I don't think there's a mistake to be made there, and especially when you look at ancient maps. India superior, Katai, Ireland the Great, Urland, Aaron, land of Aaron. Another find of the remarkable stones with ancient engravings was made by the energetic preacher Rev J. Gass in a creek bed in Cleona Township, Scott County, and a description appears in the Academy proceedings. 2 of the stones were brought to the Academy and placed in a museum. The other relics were too cumbersome for the enthusiastic divines dredging facilities. They recreated this based off his word of mouth. But yeah, here's the recreation. A limestone of red cedar post and near replica Davenport gravestone. Again, very similar lettering here. I apologize for the poor quality here. You can look this up yourself. But yeah, these disappeared, so they had to make replicas. They went into private collections. So now we're going to jump into Barry Fell's book and give you his opinion that came later from that first opinion, and I think is a invaluable one. All right, where were we here, Barry? 241 of you in the chat. Amazing. Good to see you guys. Appreciate you joining me tonight. Where was I? Had this pulled up and I misclicked here. Is this where I want to be? We can get rid of this. Of course, it's going to take forever to load. So yeah, like we've covered, we've talked about mud-flooded, berry standing forests. We've talked about giants. We've talked about relics, out of place relics, even for what we would call the mound builders, so to say, and the designations that those and the kind of let's just recheck this out then, since it's being annoying. So next we're going to get into his interpretation of the sun worship stone. We're going to talk about the languages that they saw, and we're going to share another article. Then we're going to get into the red ochre graves and how important that is in correlating not only the language, the zodiac. Now remember, we're talking about Babylonians, Chaldeans, Egyptians, Assyrians, Greeks, Romans. How can we have all of these different groups with these similarities? Again, this kind of connects back with the Buried Empires series, where I talk about Ireland the Great and this kind of overarching idea of the war between the Church of Iessa, or the foundations of, quote, Christianity, and that the fall of Etruria led to the war between post-Romans and the Celtiberians, or the Irish, or the Scottish, whatever designation you want to give them, and that this druidic magi serpent priest class, mariner class, was traveling the world teaching people not only language but astrology, on and on and on. All right, let's try to get back to where we were. The Celtiberians. See, I could just read this whole article here, but I strongly suggest you guys go back and check out his thing on the Celtiberians. Oh, of course, I lost my page here. That's annoying. No, that's not it. Excuse me, I apologize. I had to recheck the book out, and now I've lost my place. Here we go. Okay. Let's just read through chat while we're waiting for all of this to load. Joe Cool, good to see you. Old World Micmac. Red ochre, green ogre, Shrek, Ogham language. Fantastic correlations. Absolutely, right? Living in the swamps. There's a lot to be said by Shrek. I kind of did a light decode on that years ago on the Tartary radio show. Robert, good to see you. It's been a while. Amy King, thanks for being here. Who else we got here? Jehudi Mithras, welcome. A lot of new people. Samuel E. Thorpe, South Soda, right along Iowa border. Ben is working on masses. Yeah, 242 people. I'll save a little time at the end to answer some questions, so keep that in mind. Yeah. Okay, let's skip ahead here to where we're talking about this. Okay, so he starts to correlate the tribes of Maine. This would be your red paint people, as they were designated in the 1800s. All right, zoom out a bit here. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. The Davenport calendar stele, found in a burial mound in Iowa in 1874 by the Reverend M. Gass, together with numerous other artifacts of North African, and Iberian origin. This inscription is written in 3 languages. So he's talking about these inscriptions up at the top here. Written in 3 languages. Egyptian hieroglyphs at the top, then Iberian Punic from right to left along the upper arc, and Libyan from left to right along the lower arc. The Libyan and Iberian Punic inscriptions say the same thing, namely that the upper hieroglyphs contain the secret of how to regulate the calendar. Their hieroglyphs give this information by indicating that a ray of light falls upon a stone called the Watcher at the moment of sunrise on New Year's Day, which is defined as the spring equinox in March. Again, when March was the first month. I've done a lot in the past about Rome changing the calendar, December, January, to pay reverence to their main deity, Janus. which was a huge deity in not only Ireland, into the Etruscans. He's kind of recaptured and branded. They made January the first month, where it was March. Blah, 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 blah. When the sun passes the first point of Aries, this stele, for long condemned as meaningless forgery, is in fact one of the most important steles ever discovered, for it is the only one on which occurs a triangular text in the Egyptian, Iberian, Punic, and Libyan languages. It is in the Putnam Museum of Davenport, the repository of other priceless national treasures found by gas. We're going to read this a little bit here. Here's his kind of breakdown of the inscriptions. The Libyan text of the Davenport stele from the Iowa Mounds. It reads from right to left. The inscription is as follows. The stone is inscribed around with a record. It reveals the naming, the length, the placing of the seasons. The Libyan inscription conveys the same sense as the Punic Iberian inscription that accompanies the other ark. Immediately above the Libyan ark, vowels are omitted from ancient inscriptions. A fuller account of the decipherment with dictionary references to the words may be found in the occasional publications of the Epigraphic Society. The checkerboard sun symbol is the same as it is seen on the equinoctial calendar temple near South Royalton, Vermont. So again, the correlation, we'll get into more of the red paint people, but the Redskins, and so the Phoenicians. And it is possible, therefore, that the symbol has a special reference to the use of the sun as a calendar regulator. On one of the inscriptions at Cachau da Rapa in Portugal, the same sun symbol is set beside Ogham letters that spell the Libyan word Ra. It's everywhere. It's all around the realm, for sure. The Punic Iberian text of the Davenport stele from the Iowa Mounds reads, set around this is a secret text defining the seasons, delimiting. The Punic Iberian inscription conveys the same as the Libyan. Neither the Libyan nor the Punic scripts have been deciphered at the time when the Davenport stele was unearthed. So that was going back to the book I had just read. And then Barry came along, and this whole book, America BC, I've quoted from it in so many episodes. Incredible book. We'll probably do a whole series on this book eventually. Consistent the readings, blah, blah, blah. These facts show that the stele cannot possibly be a forgery, as has mistakenly been believed since 1890, when an archaeologist at the Smithsonian Institute declared the inscription to be a meaningless jumble of signs based on the English alphabet. And you want to know what's funny is this, thankfully, this reverend wouldn't hand it over and he couldn't get bought out. That's why it's incredibly rare. This stele is so important, and I'm spending a lot of time in this episode on this, because this is one of those really rare examples that when the Smithsonian couldn't steal it, or they couldn't buy you out, they would say that it was a forgery. No one appears to have noticed the Egyptian part of the inscription, which could have been translated at that date. Could not have been. Fortunately, the Davenport Academy preserved the stele together with the associated artifacts, now seen to be of North African and Iberian provenance. Now, we'll show kind of some correlations there. This is the Egyptian part. Read from above downwards. To a pillar attach a mirror. So that now they're talking about this part here, the people holding hands around this watcher stone. I've talked about the watcher stone and how it relates with the lodestones and the worshiping of stones. Mecca, think about the people at Mecca circling the black stone. There are so many similarities in these different religions, and it goes again back to solar worship. Reads downwards. To the pillar attach a mirror, so that a new year, the sun being in conjunction with the ram in its house, talking about Aries, March 1st, the new year, at the tilting of the balance, i.e. of night and day, the equinox. So isn't that incredible? They use a mirror on this watcher stone and they can tell when the sun and the moon are in perfect balance when they're in the equinox. These quote watcher stone ideas, they exist all over. They're found in Scotland, they're found in Ireland, and as he mentioned, that one in Portugal, they're found in North Africa, they're found on islands in the Pacific. I found them in New Mexico. I talk about that one about the Druid stones in New Mexico. Everywhere, really, and these stones being used as calendars. I mean, every culture really has been doing that for a very long time. I think that's probably as full. We want to look at this one. Okay. So here's that stone. They call it the Dedge column, which I wanted to look up. Show you, hopefully. So the Dedge, as he calls it, the column, is one of the most ancient and commonly found symbols in ancient Egyptian religion. It is a pillar-like symbol in Egyptian hieroglyphics representing stability. It is associated with the creator god Ptah. Now, we talked about him in Utah when we designated some of the symbols and hieroglyphics found in the cave systems in Utah, found in the Grand Canyon, some of the mummies found in Utah. We're going to show a mound that was opened that's very much Egyptian here before the end of this. The Osiris myth, Osiris was killed by Set by being tricked into a coffin made to fit Osiris exactly. Then they had the coffin with now deceased flung into the Nile River. Blah, 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 blah. The origin, the Dedge may have originally been a fertility cult related pillar made from reeds or sheaves or a totem. Yep. Again, grain. So when we talk about sacrifices made, when you go far enough back in the record, it's always kind of the corn festival correlates with this, and the first feasts. They would burn the first picked crops of whatever it was, and that you find the corruption of flesh and offerings of blood, really amping up after the fall of Etruria, and the Romans really built this whole thing about the pagans, being cannibals and sacrifices of flesh, when really it was mostly them perpetuating the whole thing all along. But yeah, the Dedge Festival of Osiris, as celebrated in Iowa around 700 BC, explanation of the scene depicted on the Davenport stele, the hieroglyphics incorporated into the picture being here translated and also rendered in the formal palace style. The Dedge column, made of bundles of reeds encircled at the top by rings, represents the backbone of Osiris, in whose honor the Dedge column was erected each year on the day of the spring equinox. This information, originally obtained by Adolf Erman from a tomb inscription of the 18th dynasty in Thebes, Egypt, is here completely confirmed by the inscription and illustration on the Davenport stele of Iowa. The mirror of reflecting metal shown to the left of the picture relates to the Egyptian text of this stele, which instructs the reader to attach a mirror to a column in such a way that the rays of the rising sun on the morning of the spring equinox will be reflected onto a single stone called the Watcher. Yeah, you can see, again, anybody that wants to dive into this more on their own, I'm trying to provide you with all the sources to do so. I think that's about as far as I want to go. I've invested a lot of time into this. There's a whole chapter designated to this, and I really strongly, just for the sake of time, I won't go too much further into this, but I strongly recommend his chapter on the Celtiberians, because it relates perfectly to my Irish origins of Etruria and Ireland the Great, Irish origins of America. Who were the Irish, right? They said they came from the land, the great land in the West, as the Egyptians say the same thing, the red lands, the red hematite lands. And why that's important when we start talking about the red ochre people, and why these burials were either painted with red ochre, or they placed a ton of red ochre, or they were painted with red ochre themselves. Yeah, lots of correlations here. So I think we'll dive into the Iowa burial, the red ochre burial, one of the most important mounds found in Iowa. Well, let's do. Okay, so this is an article from 1915. And it's one of the rare ones you can find where they're talking about this, because the Smithsonian had poo-pooed this. Basically, you can barely find anything about the Davenport stele in newspapers. There's almost nothing. But here's a great little excerpt. 1915. So again, this thing had been seen by a lot of people by this time. And here's how the opinions had changed. Remember, 1890, written off by the Smithsonian. This is 1915. A great fervor, having a spice of comedy about it, was created in the scientific world a few years ago by the discovery in Iowa of 3 inscribed tablets in one of the mounds of the Cook Farm Group. Upon these tablets was plain evidence that the people who made them possessed a written language, and if this were the case, then the mounds must indeed be the work of a vanished civilization. Professor Page of Copenhagen, Monsieur Jomad of Paris, and a number of learned linguists of this country put their heads together over the tablets and finally announced that most of the characters were Celtiberic, but there was also letters from the Greek, Etruscan, Gaelic, Ursay, Phoenician, and Anglo-Saxon alphabets. Now, that just rhymes perfectly with the zodiacal expressions that we were covering there. That whole art, this will be a video I do on another time. This is called the American Mound Builders. It covers a bunch of mounds and just cool stuff they found. So yeah, we'll cover the red ochre gravesite found in Iowa. Then we'll talk about red ochre. We'll show the red ochre peoples and how that correlates with people all around the world, and how that, as well as the language and the calendar, shows you this kind of things going back to a one world. Again, I hate using the word religion, but a one world source of information, and the stars in the heavens and the zodiac being a key piece in that puzzle. Okay. Broke 250. Love you guys. Thanks for being here. Hope you're enjoying the material. I'll be announcing the next state. It's likely going to be Nebraska, but I'm kind of still thumbing around with correlating materials and what state will be next. Maybe let me know in chat what you guys are thinking. What states you like to see. I know everyone has a different opinion. The most common comment I get is, when am I going to do X state? But yeah. Of course, this is never. Chapter 6. Okay. Red ochre burial. Could never remember exactly. Too many books in my head. Described in chapter 6. Well, that's where I want to go. I want to go to chapter 6. Well, what page is it then? 109. Okay. All righty. Here we are. Red ochre burial cult of Iowa. Maine. Yeah, we're going to get to Maine, I promise. It correlates drastically with this state. It's incredible, but we'll make a lot. Connecticut's a tough one, Jillian. It's such a small place. I have a few good ones from Connecticut that I remember off the top of my head. I already did Ohio. Nicole, check that out. One of my favorites. Idaho. Yeah, I'm going to get there. I know I keep saying I'll get to every state, but I just like seeing what everyone thinks. Mugio, Celtiberians, all Andalus, aka Spain, Portugal. Gemstone, crystal, mineral, magic. New face, good to see you. Idaho, yeah, New Jersey. Oh, New Jersey is going to be great. I have tons on New Jersey. Man, lots of new faces. Appreciate you all for being here. Okay, so we're getting low on time here, so we're gonna finish up with red ochre, even though I have quite a bit more here. I never get to it all. Okay. So red ochre burial cult. In his valuable study of ore excavations in northeastern Iowa, Logan defines a red ochre mound type, which he correlates with early woodland. Red ochre, or hematite, is a bright red iron oxide which the Indians ground into a fine powder, mixed with fat. It could be used as a paint for body decoration and also for painting designs on rocks called pictographs. Really important. I talked about this in Utah, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, on and on and on. Placing red ochre with burials and mounds is a diagnostic attribute of this cult. Now, again, remember what we correlated here with the languages, the burials. You know, we're showing so many similarities between, you know, who really are the Greeks, who really are the Assyrians, who are the Chaldeans, you know, who are the Etruscans. Again, check out the Etruscan series because I break down their language and correlate it a lot with not only Phoenician, but into Mesoamerica, Mesopotamia, and that the Etruscans were found all over Mexico. Blah, blah, blah. A typical example is Mound 10 in the Frenchtown Mound Group in southern Clayton County. None of the other mounds in the group contained burials covered with red ochre. Red ochre was sacred and only used by certain people. Now, what I've been saying all along here is that when we talk about how can we say that there's Greeks and Egyptians and Romans and all these things live in the same area? Well, because the world was built up of confederates. Everything was a confederacy. You had multiple cultures. Again, skin color is a recent creation. Ancient literature, no one ever described anyone by a skin color. Almost all these people had, quote, the same religion, and their languages were so common, again, spread out with different groups. You know, with different groups, you get different changes in tongue and in different letters and different pronunciations, but the roots were all there. And then, you know, through cataclysms, perhaps war, because we know that war has done a lot of damage to languages. You know, the Jesuits plainly say that they wanted to essentially rebabble the world and muddle the languages. Chinese was destroyed by the British. Russian was destroyed by the Bolsheviks, on and on and on. I mean, the Mayan language was completely wiped out. The Irish were executed for speaking their native tongue. You know, Gaelic, look at these ancient languages. Modern Rome has killed more people for speaking their native tongue because that was like the biggest hint of this previous age. And these graves and a lot of what I'm trying to do here with Anomalous America is correlate that these same ideas you can take from American states, build a kind of similar idea for America, but then show it that it goes everywhere all over the world. The mound itself is conical. This is really important because I've talked a lot, especially episode 1. I showed that Alaska was covered with conical mounds and they called them purely Etruscan or Roman. Why is Alaska covered in Roman Etruscan mounds? Don't know. Red ochre in those mounds as well in Alaska, buried in ice, you know, makes no sense. Are these people digging in the permafrost to build them to bury their dead? I certainly don't think so. Again, the weather change came much closer to our generation than we can possibly imagine. The mound is conical, 44 feet in diameter and 4 feet high. Again, all of these are buried. Just like we talk about mud flooded buildings, a lot of these mounds, like I've shown through all of my episodes, they dig down and they can almost never find the bottom of them. In fact, they find, there's remains in the layer here. Oh, we go down another 10 feet. There's a whole nother layer of remains. These people were either building remains on buried cities that they felt were like sacred or buried buildings, or they were layering burials one on top of the other. And in some cases, one civilization on top of another, not just one king, one generation on top of a generation, but several generations, and then a wipeout event and a whole nother culture. The Indians selected the place to build their mound and then carefully stripped off the topsoil and dug 5 shallow graves. 3 of these were lined with yellow clay, but contained nothing more than 2 or 3 clamshells. Now, the yellow clay is really important because I showed that the yellow clay was found to be very radioactive, and that the Indians of Utah and Arizona were mixing this clay and turning it into a powder, and it was found to contain high levels of radium, and that they would glow in the dark. These may have been proxy graves, blah, 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 blah. Again, I'm going to try and fast forward here. All the material here for anybody, these 3 books I mentioned are all right here. You can dive into them further. So here's what the burial mound looks like, and the red ochre layer. Probably can get rid of this so you guys can see it better. The burial floor nearby lay a flat rock, and resting on it were 2 additional blades and a stone awl. The Indian in the other grave was placed in an extended position, accompanied by red ochre, but without any tools or implements. 6 partially intact skeletons lay on the prepared mound floor in an extended burial position, and red ochre was placed with each one. Grave objects included a broken, socketed antler. Okay, the antlers are really important because remember, I talk about the masks. The masks of these people are Celtic. They have these masks with horns, which are exactly like the Cernunnos deities. Masks are found all over the Mississippi and Missouri valleys, but the antlered masks are really important. Etruria as well. Again, I'm fast forwarding. It's polished all 2 conch shells, really important. They loved the conch shell as a sacred item. Traded in the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, there are conch shells, huge pearls, bigger pearls than you'd ever find today, found all the way up in the Great Lakes region. Again, copper from the Great Lakes area is found on all continents. So this same group we're talking about here, this Celtiberian, Roman, blah, 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 this one group that fits under all these umbrellas, this seafaring race, was trading with the entire world at one point. Again, you can find Great Lakes, Michigan copper on all continents and in tons of mounds all over Mexico, South America. On the mound floor lay bundle burial, also covered with red ochre. It is an interest of note that not a single pot shard was found in the mound. After the burials were placed in position, the Indians began to fill in the mound. Either at this time or later, 2 or more bundle burials without red ochre or graves were put in the mound, filled and covered with rocks. So this kind of goes again with what I was saying about how you had what I would probably call fair-skinned Celtic groups living side by side with, again, Mongoloid or whatever, Asiatic, South American. You had all of these races living together because their burials are different, just like I pointed out in especially Arizona and New Mexico, that you have tall, blonde, or tall, fair-skinned, buried with ochre, with paintings of red ochre all in his tomb. Check out my Emperor Tigrinus video from New Mexico, where they found a 7-foot-tall, red-headed, quote, giant, which he was buried in a tomb with short little pygmies that were dark-haired. And they were buried sitting position, holding their knees. He was buried in a lying position in a red ochre burial. So again, you had all of these tribes, confederacies living together. So to kind of fast forward for the sake of time, the red ochre burial is very important. So again, red ochre, iron ochre, it's a clay earth pigment. Ferric oxide, it is slightly magnetic. Hematite. The red ochre people were an indigenous people of North America. Now, where was I here? I wanted to go. Here we go. So as they say, the red ochre people, but the red ochre people are a worldwide group. So here we're talking about the Upper Great Lakes, the Illinois River, Ohio Valley, and American Midwest. and discovered to a red burial complex. Again, red burial complexes have been found in Maine all the way to California. The red ochre people also spoke an ancestral form of Algonquin. If Micmac is still in here, he knows what this is. Again, the Algonquin language group is ancient, and just like the Punic Iberian text, quote, Egyptian text we're dealing with, it's in the same family group. And the Algonquin mythos is incredibly interesting. Here we're going to go kind of across the board and show you how red ochre is found all around the world. Red ochre has been used as a coloring agent in Africa for over 200,000 years. Now, remember what they were talking about with the North Africans, the Celtiberians. Well, the Berbers, the Basque, they all use red ochre, and they all describe being visited by a red paint people, or a people painted in red ochre from the West, who taught them the zodiac, blah 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 blah. This is found in all around the world. I did a video on the North African tribe, and this book here, History of Davenport. I'm going to scroll up here. Pardon me. They found this right here, this mask vase. This is identical with pottery found in North Africa. And in fact, the tribe where scarification is known, I did a video on this as well, correlates to Atlantis, or the lost land of the West. And here we have a very different looking type of phenotype than we're normally fed, as far as the type of what an Indian, high cheekbone, long black hair idea. Throw that out the window. We know that that's completely false. But again, in ancient Egypt, yellow was associated with gold. So like we talked about, that phosphorescent yellow paint was sacred. People say it was gold paint. Well, they tested it in New Mexico and Utah and found that it was highly radioactive, and the people glowed in the dark, and they wore it during their rain dance ceremony. The skin and bones of the gods were believed to be made of gold. The Egyptians used yellow ochre extensively in tomb paintings, though occasionally they used orpiment, which made a brilliant color but was highly toxic. Yeah, made with arsenic. This relates again to the radium paints. You'll find these types of phosphorescent toxic paints used everywhere. Red ochre in ancient Egypt was used as a rouge or a lip gloss. Again, rouge, the oldest form of makeup. Again, the idea of red cheeks, red face. Again, I believe would be coming from these merchant trade peoples, the Phoenicians. And remember, Phoenicians weren't just fair skinned. A Phoenician was a secret society of mariners, essentially. People that were taught how to use they were like masons of the ocean. They were taught sacred geometry, geomagnetics, how to travel by the stars, how to use a compass, on and on and on. Ancient Greece and Rome, ochre was the most commonly used pigment for painting walls in ancient Mediterranean world. In ancient Greece, red ochre was called miltos, red-haired or ruddy. In ancient Athens, when assembly was called, a contingent of public slaves would sweep the open space of the agora with ropes dipped in miltos. Those citizens then loitered there instead of moving to the assembly area, would risk having their clothes stained with paint. In England, red ochre was also known as ruddle, and was used to mark sheep, and can also be used as a waxy waterproof coating on structures. You get the point. It's everywhere. And you want to know what's funny is that the largest amount of it found in funeral type situation was in the Etruscans. The Etruscans were painting all of their tombs in red ochre. Red ochre burials, again, have been found in California, Arizona, Utah, all along the Mississippi Valley, the Missouri Valley, Florida, Texas, Maine, Canada, Ireland, Italy, on and on and on. And there's an island off North Italy, off Tuscany area, I can't remember what it's called, that was under Etruscan control. And for a long time, the Etruscans basically controlled the trade of this red ochre paint. Purple ochre, really important. Again, the Phoenicians are, some of you may be familiar with the purple ink that it came from snails, but it also was found in a very rare variant of this hematite. Start typing out questions if you have them now. I want to finish up with one specific one here, and then I'll kind of read through what you guys have. I'm trying to figure out which one it was. Appreciate you all. Held 250 of you for a long time. I know some of these are long-winded. Appreciate you guys very much. Thanks for joining me here again. It's been, I don't even know how long, several months since we've done this Anomalous America. Getting back in the groove. Really, really lights a fire when all of you are showing your interest in joining me here on a Monday, on a moon day. I think it was this one. Yeah, since we were just talking about the Algonquins, we'll finish with this. This will be a perfect wrap-up. All right, gemstone crystal mineral. Any info on WAD? WAD? I don't know what that is. Sorry, specify. Anything about the Fa Empire? Not familiar. Yes, red and purple. Marathon. I guess these must be specific places. Red is sacred. Top of the rainbow. Yeah, red is sacred too because in burials it represented the blood. Yeah, life, regeneration. Got some good people on this channel. Didn't go unnoticed. Appreciate you. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you being here and talking. Comments are great. You know, good discussion in the chat. Helps a lot. Algic, Algonquin. Yeah, I'll have to do a whole series or a whole episode on the Algonquin language and show the correlations. It's crazy, especially with the Micmac. The language is the key, everybody. We're breaking it all down. You know, that Tower of Babel is coming down. Nothing really here. Okay. All right. Woad blue ochre. Oh, blue ochre. So blue ochre and blue clay were also sacred. There are some blue clay burials, but I don't know of it being used as widely as red ochre, especially because the red ochre hematite was key in it being used as a sunblock. But yeah, I'd have to dive into that some more. Thanks for putting that on my radar. I'll have to look into I've never seen it pronounced that way. But yeah, the blue clay was also sacred, and it was found in many burials. Leighton Lexicon, good to see you. Wondering if you have come across any finds in northern Arctic Canada. Canada's tough, especially because Canada, their archive, I have to use a VPN because they don't allow outsiders free reign, and it gets a little tricky. Yeah, Canada's pretty annoying. They don't like sharing their archives. If you live in Canada, you have a much better chance. That's becoming harder and harder to venture outside of the US borders because archived information, especially when it's under like congressional oversight, which it is in America, but it's open to everyone worldwide, it's kind of tough to find. But yeah, so unfortunately I don't have a whole lot on Canada. I wish I did. Yeah, language is key. Okay, so we're going to finish with this one, guys, and we're going to wrap it up here. Episode 20, Iowa. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I could have dived into a million more. I could spend 10 hours on every state, you guys, I promise. So if there was some specific town or area, like I could have done a whole series on the caves of Iowa. But again, going off, you know, interesting explorations of the 1800s, a lot of the Iowa caves weren't found until mining got so prevalent that they broke into a lot of these caves, but because they had been buried, the entrances were completely unknown. A strange people, and this is from 1905. Algonquins, the prehistoric race of Iowa, to be looked up. Now, again, remember this when we were talking about the prehistoric races of Iowa. How do we relate the Algonquins to the Celtiberians, to the Greeks, to the Romans, to the Etruscans? Because the languages and the relics are showing that that's the foundation as far back as we can go tracing language. But yeah, expected to throw much light on the character of this giant race. Discoveries that have swept away traditions of early Iowa and prefaced ancient history of the state with an epoch lost in mystery until the explorer's spade uncovered relics of an unknown race in a mound at Okoboji are to be supplemented with systemic ethnological research. Systematic. Fred and Alan Pearson of Cedar Rapids will this summer pursue further the exploration they began last September. Eminent ethnologists declare that the ancient history of Iowa is to be rewritten, as relics taken from the mounds give evidence of a race unknown to tradition or lore of the state. New light will be thrown on the mystery of the early ages of Iowa by the investigations now at hand. Ancient Algonquins. The northern Iowa was inhabited by the Algonquins centuries ago, is the conclusion formed by ethnologists in the light of recent discoveries. History has it that this race had never touched the shores of Spirit Lake and Okoboji and attributed the presence of the mounds to other tribes who had erected them for lookouts. Now, the lookout thing, we've debunked that in several episodes, and we showed that a lot of these really advanced canal systems and mound systems that were actually cities that were buried, and that the tips of these buildings were misconstrued as mounds that were taken over for wartime purposes. But it has remained for the explorer to overthrow legends and traditions and resurrect relics of an epoch hitherto unknown to the writers of ancient Iowa. Strange and wonderful people. A race of gigantic stature and superior intelligence, skilled in the arts and crafts, such were the ancient Algonquins. Civilization on a plane approaching that of the 20th century had been established ages ago near our northern chain of lakes. While the system of government and method of living was no doubt tribal, the relics of the race scattered about in the mounds indicate a high degree of knowledge and skill. Curiously fashioned earthenware, beautifully illuminated with scenes of the woodland and the hunt and chase and the battlefield, marvelous creations in copper, vases and ornaments, engraved with characters of unknown language. Again, the unknown language, we've blown that one out of the water. It's not an unknown language. As Barry Fell showed you quite distinctively, we're dealing with, Egyptian, Celtiberian, and how all those slightly different symbols can relate back to one particular group. Not race, but confederacy. Forgotten through tradition. And no confederacy is better summed up by the Algonquin. They were considered a very strong confederacy and joined many tribes together as their races were being absolutely pillaged. Forgotten through tradition and tribal lore, unremembered in Indian legends and myths so far back to their existence date, 7 Algonquin kings have slept for ages in a mound on the borders of Spirit Lake. So this is the 7 hills I was talking about. They had an area in northern Iowa that they called the 7 Hills. And again, this is the 7 Hills of Rome, the 7 Hills of Ireland. Look up cities of 7 Hills. There's like 50 plus of them. I'd say even more than that, correlating again astronomically. And, this idea of kingship being related to the sun and the stars. And now, ages afterward, remnants of the ancient race are returned from the unknown and its attainments engrossed upon the pages of history. Sepulchre of royalty. Grouped around a central monument of granite were found in the mound the remains of 7 men, a woman, and a child. That they were royal personages was evidenced by rich attire. 7 kings, this idea of 7 kings and 7 hills and 7 stars and 7 princes, it's just like these languages and the constellations, and it's crazy. Badges of office such as scepter and wands firmly held in the mummified hands. So here we are. We have 7 people, hands crossed, holding scepter and wand. Sound familiar? Mummified. Glittering ornaments, copper bracelets, and bright beads bedecked and the remains. The baby held in tight embrace a gaily dressed doll, and by its side were trinkets that delight childish fancy. The heads were firmly bound to the monument with thick strips of tanned bark, and at the foot of each mummy was erected a memorial slab. When the covering was removed and light and air admitted, the remains crumbled into dust. Funeral rites and ceremonies. Beneath the tangled undergrowth, so far under the surface that its presence was not revealed until excavation began, a beaten path encircled the interior of the mound. The track was worn smooth from travel, and footprints were visible in the soil. So now I want you to remember what I had shown you earlier.
Ancient.
Here, that I think we're dealing with. See how they're showing you the mummy symbol, and that you have a central column, and that you have a track where people walked. I think this inside of this tomb, they had the central pillar representing probably the sun, the Deja column, the tree of life, whatever you want to call it, Polaris, whatever, and the funerary procession. The people would hold hands and walk around these 7 people, these 7 mummies buried around this central column. At regular intervals, ethnologists believe the tribe and religious observants walked in solemn procession around the mound, chanting their memorials to the departed royalty. Year after year and century after century, these rites and ceremonies were observed, and the deep track in the mound bears out such theory. They find similar things in China. They believe that you could hear your ancestors, that they would, how today we have this weird idea where we go and visit the graves and we talk to our loved ones. In this time period, they could hear their loved one. Kings could still give instruction on how to lead the people or go to war or whatever, and that they would visit these areas and could communicate with the dead. Very interesting. Ancestral worship, you can look that up and see the drastic overlays with the Chinese burial methods. Same with the Etruscan. Drifted to Mexico. Although the link connecting these ancients with the Algonquin related to our history is completely lost, it is believed that some members of the ancient tribe went to Mexico before extinction of the race in Iowa, and that their descendants, drifting to the Atlantic coast centuries afterwards, were the ancestors to the Algonquins known to us. So yeah, that was the best mound I could find. Very much Egyptian, mummified, 7 of them, 7 hills, 7 mounds laid around a column. Yeah, so we're ending it there. So I'll spend a little time in chat. I didn't see what our highs got to, but 260 of you guys. Appreciate you guys very much. All right, we'll just start reading the comments. Some of you are pretty out there. Yeah. That's like what I like to hear. Lord of the Rings. Reading from the most recent up can be tricky, but Lord of the Rings, you know me, I love Tolkien. I always make the references here. Middle Earth. Jed, thank you. He is silent. I figured on that one, but I'm going to pronounce things wrong all the time. So, but thank you. I am in Rock Island now. Really? Amazing. Crazy. Are you like at the arsenal? Are you in the military? 7 races. Yeah. There's a lot. So there's tons with the number 7. I have a ton of articles on 7. I plan on doing a video on the ancient mysticism behind the number 7. Maybe I'll get my button gear and get that done. Hope everyone had an excellent weekend. Well said, Joe. Hope you did too. I speak this ancient language. Yeah, I know, Micmac. We got to get together on some material here. History is kept from us because shut up, slave. Well, I've said this before. The path to truth is a path that you have to walk on your own, and you have to find it on your own, and it means something slightly different to every single person. And I think that part of this reality is it wouldn't be easy, or part of this is kind of a journey in self-realization and empowerment and bettering yourself. Kind of the soul's journey, the soul incarnated in matter. Good and evil. You have all these things pulling you each direction. that you have to have a battle to find truth, and that it is a journey and it takes work, and nothing's going to be given to you. Um, I've kind of walked away in a way from the, um, kind of interdimensional beings have taken control of the realm, and we're all a bunch of slaves. And because no matter what, your imagination and your freedom to think is the most important thing, and your ability to read and research and develop your own opinions and to have an imagination, those can never be taken from you. The things they can take are things that don't matter. I mean, obviously your family, there are, again, I'm painting with a broad brush there, but yeah, we're all on the hero's journey, and it takes work, and it can be hard, and there's a lot of ups and downs. Okay, I think we're going to stop there. Higher side chats to Grimerica show logical. Yeah, I want to do Grimerica. I haven't heard from anybody from them. I've listened to Grimerica quite a few times, so that'd be pretty awesome. Can't wait for more Norumbega. That's next. Micmac, way to go. That's my next episode in Buried Empires, Ireland the Great. We're diving into Norumbega. We're going to show the Celtiberian, Irish, Church of Iessa, whatever, ancient roots of this region called Norumbega and how that relates to ancient America. So part 4 in Buried Empires will be coming out this week. So stay tuned for that. We dive into Norumbega. And yeah, look forward to your comments as always. Thank you. I thank you on the I Love Your Radium work. I have a Radium episode in the works, but it's kind of on the back burner because it's a bit of a long one. It's like I'm almost 2 hours in, so I'm just taking my time on that one. Leighton Lexicon, appreciate the info and books downloaded for the collection. Awesome. I'll do some digging on the Canadian side of the archives. Yeah, I can't access Canadian university pages. Not all of it's locked out, but you really do need a VPN or have to be in Canada. Thank your Prime Minister for doing that. Yeah, so that's good night, everybody. Appreciate you all for episode 20. Yeah, Greg has my contact info. Okay, cool. Well, I would love if they're interested in what I have to present, I'm interested in sitting down and talking with them. So if you want to be a middleman for that, I would love that. But yeah, I kind of let things happen. I don't really go asking for interviews, but I'm grateful. I got an interview coming up, a pretty big one next month. Really looking forward to that. So I'll kind of keep that on the hush hush. And you never know when I'll be back on with Greg. I hope this summer I'll do episode 4 with him, which would be amazing. Puts me in pretty high pace with a lot of his guests. Again, I grew up listening to that and played a big role in my life. So for those of you that may be new to me, you can see my interviews on Higher Side Chats. I've done 3, if you're familiar. Again, all the things I've mentioned, I have so much more source material and other videos to check out. If you enjoyed this episode of Anomalous America, there are 19 other episodes to watch. So plenty to keep you busy. And each one of them filled with unbelievable, crazy, never imagined to be in that state or even your state, whatever that may be. So love you guys. Thanks for joining in. Appreciate you very much, and enjoy the rest of your night. Good night.